Hey, how's it going? My name's Alfred, and welcome to the channel. Before we get started on today's episode, I just want to address something with you guys real quick. So in the past, we've used the name Adventure Bound Off-Road, and moving forward, we're going to be changing it up a little bit. We're going to be using the name like Off-Camber, Off-Cambered Adventures, or potentially even Off-Camber Off-Road. But my buddy Rob, he's going to use the Adventure Bound Off-Road name, and he's going to continue to build up his channel. We're going to be doing similar content, and we're going to be helping each other out between our builds and our own projects. But his is going to be more oriented, probably more towards the shop, because that's where we're currently at, is here at the Adventure Bound Off-Road shop here in Escondido, California. So continue to watch, same content, same great fun. Working on the JK today, so let's get started. So on today's episode, we'll be working on the backside of the JK, and specifically we'll be addressing the tire carrier, because as you guys can tell, it's no longer installed. So the stock carrier is only made out of die-cast magnesium, and although magnesium is strong, from the factory it was only ever rated to hold a 33-inch tire. And the way it's mounted is just these 6 locations in the middle of the tailgate. So of course our plan is to run bigger tires, bead locks, and a high lift jack back here, so that carrier was never going to be able to support that weight. So we ended up jumping on Motobilt's website, and we found a solution that they offer that's going to work perfectly for this build. So let me show you guys the components that make up the Motobilt tire carrier.
The carrier body is constructed from 3/16 laser cut steel and utilizes 12 mounting points instead of the original 8. Also made from 3/16 is the new hinge brackets along with the brackets to mount the tire. Mounting hardware is nicely packaged and uses grade 8 bolts and nylon lock nuts. The new hinge pin is greasable and the dowel and bushing allow for an easy operation. This high lift jack mount option is an additional cost, but can always be added at a later time.
Now since we're familiar with the components of the Motobilt tire carrier, we're going to go ahead and finish prepping up the hinges of the Jeep, and we're going to start prepping up the tire carrier so we can start throwing it on. Now we got the plastic covers off the hinges, and that reveals the 4 bolts that hold the hinges onto the tailgate. So before we start moving that, what we're going to do is we're going to add tape between the tailgate and the tub, and that's just going to help us when we actually install the tire carrier, the Motobilt tire carrier, is it gives us a point of reference. So if the tailgate does decide to shift during installation, we have a point where we can actually line the tailgate back up with the tub, so we don't have any issues with buying on the latches. So another big difference between the Motobilt tire carrier and the stock tailgate of the JK is that the hinges are completely different. So the hinges on the JK uses a pin style, and I mean, when you put a lot of weight on it, those pins just wear out and they'll get a lot of tailgate sag. Now the difference is the Motobilt actually uses like a polyurethane bushing, and it's built into the carrier assembly, so it ties all together, so it has a lot more rigidity to it. So what I'm doing now is I'm taking all the stock hardware that came off the tailgate and I'm cleaning it up in preparation for black spray paint. Because you can tell that some of the hardware they're going to be using used to be orange, but it's going to clash against the textured black powder coat that we end up doing for the tire carrier. So I'm just taking the die grinder with a fiber disc and it's taking off all the old paint, and I'll prep it up and then spray it. I just got done painting the hardware, and after 3 coats, I think it's looking pretty good. Unfortunately, we're all out of semi-gloss black, so I guess I have to settle for just regular gloss. Now, I'm going to let that hardware dry overnight, because if it's still wet and tacky, I don't want to rip all the new paint off of it. So that kind of leaves me with only one more thing that I could possibly do today, and that's just install the bushings of the tire carrier. So I'll get those pressed in, and then we'll come back tomorrow. So along with the tire carrier today, I'm also addressing some other issues that came up with the Jeep. So when we were away for that week of the Key and the Hammers, I dropped my Jeep off at the body shop real close to us called ACM. And I wanted them to go through the frame and make sure everything was square, because I did suspect the Jeep was an accident at one point. Just because if you look at the door gaps, you could tell that they're really tight on the passenger side, and they're a lot bigger on the driver's side. And you could tell that it was repainted at a certain point in its life, and you could tell that they used a aftermarket fender on the passenger side, not original Mopar one. So I dropped the Jeep off to those guys, and they took their measurements. And now this week I'm back, I got the Jeep back, and this is kind of like what we found out. So, excuse the crude drawing. This is kind of the results that we found out. So it looks like the Jeep was involved in an impact pretty significantly on the front passenger side. And what that caused was that the passenger side frame rail was pushed back almost to be a diamond shape. And along with that, it looks like it also buckled the frame rail in the passenger wheel well. Although the title did say it wasn't an accident and didn't really specify how significant it was, but the damage is there. But luckily enough, the damage is fixable. So the ACM, the body shop that I took the Jeep for the measurements, does have a machine where we drive the Jeep on, chain it down, and use hydraulic rams to pull the frame back square again. It's a pretty simple process. They've been doing it for years, and they're pros at this point. The only thing they ask me is just to prep the Jeep before I send it over to them. And it's small things. It's just removing the inner fender well, removing the upper control arm on the passenger side, and removing some of the wires and brake lines, just so I can have access to that frame rail. Because what they will do is they'll use a strap and wrap the frame, and they'll put that strap to the chain and then pull that back to the hydraulic ram.
To show you all the extent of the damage, here's a shot of the clearances between the upper control arm and the frame. Normally there should be about an inch gap between these two components. The pink mark that you see is the location where the body shop needs to pull the frame. But before I drop the Jeep off, I'll remove the upper control arm to gain more access to run the strap. Now we're going to go through and install the brackets for the hinges. Now when you install these guys, you're going to keep using your factory hardware that came out of the original ones. And you're going to leave these loose, and then we'll mock up the tire carrier. And once we get everything kind of aligned where it needs to be, then we'll go back through and do a final torque on it. Now I got the Motobilt tire carrier onto the hinges with the hinge pin installed. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to close the carrier and add a couple bolts into the tailgate. That's going to give me like a rough alignment, and then I'll go through and I'll tighten down one of the bolts on the hinges, so then I can swing it back down and tighten down the rest. With two bolts aligning the tire carrier body to the tailgate, I take a long reach T50 torque spit driver and tying down the middle bolts on the hinge brackets. This will prevent the carrier from dropping down, but still give me enough slop to make any smaller adjustments. Now I'll go back and remove the two bolts securing the carrier to the body and make my adjustments. Once I'm happy with the alignment of all the holes, I'll swing the carrier body open and tying down the remaining bolts on the hinge brackets. Adding the 3M double-sided tape is my personal recommendation during the install. Anytime I install components onto a body of a vehicle that I don't plan on removing anytime soon, I'll add a layer of double-sided tape. Not only does it help hold components together during the install, but it also smooths the high spots and fills the voids in these two components. This is especially true here since my Jeep's body is smooth paint and the tire carrier is coated in a textured black powder coat. Now I have the tire carrier all on and all the bolts tightened down. We're going to go through and just make sure it actually opens and closes, and we have no issues with the bind. So here's the plate that goes onto the tire carrier, and as you can see, there's a number of holes that allow this plate to go up and down depending on what size tire you're running and how low or how high you would like it. This tire carrier from Motobilt they only rate it for a 37
I'm going to be trying to run a 38 off of it. So I'm going to be going the highest locations as I can, just to give me the most chance of clearing the bumper. But I am also running the Motobilt frame chop bumper after I get this all installed. So we'll see how much lower I can go, but for right now, I'll just mount it high. And then another issue I kind of ran into is that after powder coat, these holes tend to get kind of smaller in size. So I'm going to go back through, I'm going to come through with a step down bit and just open them up a little bit. So now we got the wheel plate installed onto the tire carrier. So right now I don't have the wheels and tires I'm going to be running on this JK, so I'm going to use my buddy's spare. My buddy Rob, he's running a 38-inch tire with the 4.5-inch back spacing. So it's going to be a very similar wheel and tire combination that I'm going to be running. Other than that, I'm going to be running a beadlock, and he's just running steel wheels. So let me guys just show you that.
The plate where the wheel bolts on is currently loose enough to still adjust and pulled back away from the Jeep. Once the wheel is on the carrier, I'll push everything forwards, and this will give me my distance where the wheel is tight to the carrier. Now I'll remove the wheel and tie in the hardware on the mounting bracket. After the bolts are tight, I'll pick up the wheel once again and place it onto the tire carrier. If I'm happy with how everything fits together, I'll install the lug nuts and call that complete.
And well, that about sums up for the installation of the Motobilt tire carrier. So the reason why I went with the tire carrier from Motobilt is because, well, number one, I felt like it was definitely a stronger option than what the stock one was. But it's also the ease of use, right? So there's other companies out there that make tire carriers that mount onto the bumper, and you have to swing out the tire carrier to open up the tailgate. And there's other companies that make a cage that bolts onto the body and then also wraps around. My issue with those is that it feels like it's an extra step, right? Although it might be a stronger option, potentially, I just hate having the fact of I have to open up one thing to open up the tailgate to get in the back. So, but I think Motobilt does a really good job at reinforcing the factory tailgate because, as you can tell, the hinges are a lot beefier, and the main plate itself, the main carrier, it runs about 3/4 of the whole tailgate. So it's a lot more structure there, so I have no issue running like a 37 or a 38. So on Motobilt's website, they only do rate the tire carrier at a 37. As you can tell, I do have a 38 back here, and size-wise, it does fit, and it fits perfectly with the high lift jack, and I don't think you can go any larger than that. Issue might be the weight and maybe longevity. I'm not sure how the added weight's going to affect the hinges, or maybe it will pull the latch off on the driver's side where actually latch is closed, but we'll have to see how time factors into that. But I don't think it will, just because just me just jumping on it and trying to force it back, it seems like it's a pretty strong carrier. And Motobilt does offer this tire carrier for the JL as well, but the issue with the JL is that the tail lights are a lot bigger, so you won't be able to run the high lift jack mount with it. So you either have to find a different solution to mount the high lift jack, or I know there's other companies out there like Oracle, or even on Motobilt's website, they offer a flush mount taillight, so that might be an option, but I'm not 100% sure because I haven't really looked into it. And Motobilt does give you good options for the tire carrier, because along with optioning it up with the high lift jack, you can also option it for a different bolt pattern. So I obviously get it in a 5-on-5, but for all the guys who are running 1-ton axles, they also offer it in an 8-lug pattern. And it also does ship raw, so they give you the option of either painting or powder coating it. So for this one, I am getting a powder coated textured black, because that's kind of like the theme I'm running with, to kind of offset the orange. So it should look pretty good to match the fenders and the bumpers. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to rip off the spare and give it back to my buddy Rob, because I just have to wait for my wheels and tires to get in, and then I'll mount them onto the Jeep. And there's other oddball, smaller things I need to do too, like mounting the license plate and wiring up the backup camera. But those are little things. I won't bore you guys with that. But hey, thanks for sticking along. Thanks for watching the build. Thanks for watching me do the install. And yeah, as time goes on and as I take it off road and hit some more aggressive trails, I'll even give it like a little review or an update on it. But thanks for sticking around, and I'll catch you guys in the next adventure.